Hello, this is Jill Walahoski, and I'm an Extension Educator at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, and I'm joined today by Suzanne Lemenestrel, who's a National Program Leader in Youth Development Research at the National Institute of Food and Agriculture, USDA. We're excited to present Part 3 of the Introduction to the National 4-H Common Measures System, and this section will focus on developing the surveys and the reports. Just as a quick overview, in previous sections you've learned about the security and current features, the authentication and authorization process, and how to manage and create users and organizations. Again, in this section we'll be focused on the survey and reporting features. You learned in previous sections about the ability to grant permissions to users at different levels. In the case of surveys, users with land-grant university or grant level survey permissions can access or edit all of the surveys that are created at their land-grant university level and at the county levels that are associated with that land-grant university. So if you have a land-grant university or grant admin permissions, you'll be able to access and edit any survey that's created both at your level or at any of the counties or sites that are associated with your land-grant university or grant. Users that you grant permissions with county level only permissions can only see tools created at their county level. And a survey cannot be deleted if there's data collected, but it can still be edited. So that's just another protection feature as we move through this system to make sure that we don't delete tools and compromise any data that's already collected. The next section of this presentation will look at creating and sending surveys. We'll go through a series of information here on the PowerPoint, and then we'll go to the live site to look at that process. The first step in creating and sending a survey is to identify the survey type. There are essentially 3 types of surveys to choose from in the drop-down menu. You'll either be administering a unique survey, which is a specific individual program that you want to evaluate post-program. You'll be selecting a cross-sectional survey, which is a specific sample of your population that you want to evaluate at one specific point in time. Or you may have the need to do a needs assessment or an exploratory evaluation to measure what is current to inform your decision making. When you're creating a survey, you'll also have the opportunity to confirm the type of IRB approval that's associated with the survey administration. Those 3 types are going to be no approval, land-grant university only approval, or national approval. And essentially that gives you at the local site level the ability to say there's no approval on this, and it's simply a survey that you're using for internal decision making and an internal review of your programs. Or it is data that you want to be able to analyze at the land-grant university level, but you didn't seek IRB permissions to have that data contributed to a national sample of data. Or you did seek that permission and you are able to allow your data, once it's in the online site, to be included in any national sample and analyzed for national level assessment. In the case of grants, you will always need to be seeking that national IRB approval, and we'll talk in another training presentation about resources that are available to help you as you seek IRB approval at your land-grant universities. When you're creating a survey, the next section down will be to select the questions. You'll find, and we'll see this when we go to look at the live site, that all the questions are auto-selected, so you'll need to deselect the items to customize the tools. We'll also be giving you some tips about how items should remain selected or deselected altogether under the individual sections, which are grouped together by outcome. And we'll look at how surveys can be administered, which is either online or in print. I have a few screenshots here before we actually go to the live site. So this is what the survey tab view looks like. If you're an admin, again, you'll see all 4 of those tabs at the top of your page for surveys, users, organizations, and reports. But based on your permissions, you may only see the survey tab or you may only see the reporting tab. In this case, we'll be looking at the survey tab view, and so you're able to see all of the surveys that you have access to at this point in time, and you'll also see there in the upper right hand corner the little plus mark and the new survey link, and that's the place where we'll go to look at developing a new survey. From that site, once a survey is created, you have the ability to email a survey out to participants. Again, we'll look at this in more detail in the live site, but if you chose to email a survey, you'd be able to enter a list of email addresses, either separated by comma or semicolon. They're in that top box. It gives you an opportunity to identify the grades range that you're collecting surveys from, either 4 to 7 or 8 to 12. You have the opportunity to tailor the subject line in the email, and then also to tailor the message that goes in the email with the link. Once you've got that information established, as you can see here on the screen, you simply send the survey by clicking the green Send button at the bottom right-hand corner of the pop-up screen. Once the email survey was successfully sent, you'll get a confirmation that says just that emails were successfully sent. And it'll show the users then that, or the participants rather, that then received that survey. And from this screen, you can add additional emails and send the survey again, or you can simply go back to the actual survey screen. When you go back to the survey tab view, just as a quick review of what you see there, when there is a survey created, you see from left to right the title of the survey that was created. In this case, it's a test survey, test survey, and the date that it was created. Those surveys are yours to name, however is most appropriate to your site and to your survey administration. I just encourage you to name them something that's very recognizable, so that as you begin to get a lot of surveys built, or whether it's under your county site or under your land grant site, it's easy for you to identify between surveys. Again, once you have several collected, you just want to be able to identify and go back to the surveys that you're interested in finding again. You'll also see the organization level at which the survey was created. They can be created either at the land grant university or grant level, or they can be created at the site level, which could be a county, it could be a grant site. In the case of this sample, this was created at the University of Nebraska land grant university level. We talked on a previous screen about the different types of surveys, whether it was a unique survey, a cross-sectional, or a needs assessment. In this particular instance, this is a cross-sectional survey. We also talked on the previous screen about the type of IRB approval. Either there's no IRB approval associated with this survey, or there is land grant university level only approval, or approval for national aggregation of the data. And so that's what you see here associated. This one has national approval. You also see a start and end date. When you actually go to develop the survey, and we'll look at that in a moment, it'll be a calendar drop down, and you'll be able to select a start and end date. The start and end dates are important in that it doesn't allow you to collect data or responses to be added, even if they've been sent out via email once that end date has expired. So simply make sure you set your start and end date appropriate to the times in which you actually will be collecting data. I might also recommend that if this is a survey that's under IRB approval, that start and end date match the start and end date that is associated with that approval, just to again ensure that you're always collecting data within the approved period of time. The next two sections you see are the collection of emailed or printed surveys. And so in this case, you can see that associated with this particular survey, there have been 6 surveys emailed to students in grades 4 to 7, and there have been 4 completed. And then you can see also in the printed section that there have been 27 printed surveys in the grades 4 to 7 and 5 in the grades 8 to 12. And there are in fact 0 printed surveys completed. Finally, in the right-hand column, you can see under the actions, the icons for emailing a survey. That envelope is your link to generating those screens we looked at a moment ago to email the survey. The little printer is the link for generating the print option for the survey. The pencil next to the printer is how you will enter data that's collected from the hard copy or paper copy versions. And the link next to that, the little pencil inside the box, is your ability to edit that particular survey. And then the green X, again, is your ability to delete the survey. There is a warning on the deletion, so should you accidentally click that screen, a warning will pop up that says, are you sure you want to delete this survey? And so there should be a check and balance there to protect you from accidentally deleting a survey. Before we go to the reporting section, we'll go ahead and go to the live site and look at some of the features we just discussed for the survey. Okay. So again, we're here at the dashboard or at the home page, and you can see that this person is an admin, and so they have survey permissions. We're looking at the same site we were looking at in the screenshots. This is Jessica's account at the University of Nebraska. She's an admin at the University of Nebraska. She has one survey currently created. But in the case that she's ready to add a new survey, you'd simply click here on the new survey link. And as an admin, she has the ability to create surveys either for the larger entity of the land grant or the grant, or she could decide that she's ready to create a survey that would maybe only be used by one specific county. So we'll say in this instance, she wants to create a survey for use in Banner County. She'll have, again, the ability to select from the drop-down box of unique program, cross-sectional, or needs assessment. This will be a unique program. She'll have the ability to decide, is there no IRB approval associated with this? Is there land grant university only, or is there national? So we'll say in this case that there's land grant only. She'll have the ability to title the survey, and again, it's appropriate to title it something that's really identifiable. So we'll just call this Banner County Survey, and I'll use today's date. Oops. You may also want to title this something that's indicative to the participants, as they'll be receiving the link, and we'll see that title of that survey. So you may also want to title it something that's indicative to the unique program. So if it's a robotics program, you may want to call it the Banner County Robotics Program Survey. Also, if the survey administration is associated with a grant, you have the opportunity to key in the grant name here if you want to track it in that way. We're not going to do that at this time, and that's just simply a type-in box. You'll also then have the ability to set the start and end dates, as we discussed a moment ago. So I'll just say that this is going to be a survey that will be administered in the month of July. So we set the start and end dates appropriately for that. And then, as I mentioned, you have the ability to select between among any of the items that are established in the Common Measures items. The first section you'll see are the demographic items, and you can see that those are all auto-selected. We're certainly encouraging you to keep those items all auto-selected to allow for the richest analysis post your data collection. As you scroll down then through, you'll see the other subsets of questions, the other surveys that are created. Again, in the previous training section, you learned that there are two age groups of surveys, 4 to 7 and 8 to 12. There are universal items, those that we consider positive youth development items, fairly general and applicable to most programs. And then there are a series of items associated with each of the mission mandate area outcomes: citizenship, science, and healthy living. So in this situation, you perhaps won't want to collect all of the items. In fact, in most cases, that probably won't be necessary. So we'll go ahead and deselect, and we'll just say for the purposes of looking at this information that we're only interested in looking at the healthy living for grades 4 to 7 items. And so we've deselected all of the other items so that those items don't appear on the survey. And we want to look then more specifically about those items associated with healthy living for grades 4 to 7. Now, we mentioned a moment ago that we're hoping that you keep the information available, the items available all in one section that are associated under each outcome. And that's a little bit difficult to see here in the actual website view. So what I'm encouraging you to do when you're looking at developing a survey is to actually reference the print versions. And in a previous section of this training, we referenced that the print versions of these tools are all available on the 4h.org webpage. If you go to About 4-H and in the Research section, which is where we are on this screen, you'll find links to Word versions of all of the surveys. And so in this instance, again, we're looking at the 4th grade Healthy Living tool. Actually have that one already opened and loaded. And so as you look at the 4th grade healthy living items, you're able to see them by section, and this is the sections when we are asking you to keep sections together. We're asking you to keep them together by the sections that are indicated here on these print versions. So section 1 is part of the demographics. We'll go ahead and scroll past that. And then section 2 refers to healthy choices. This refers to those outcomes that are associated with youth making healthy choices in regards to the dietary guidelines. And so you'll see that under section 2, healthy choices, there's question 4, question 5, and question 6. And then we start into section 3, physical activity. When you go back to the actual live site, the numbering of the questions is slightly different because the questions are numbered, as you can see here on the screen, 1 through 4 underneath this header. On the paper version, this was question number 4, and there were these 9 items associated with it. A new header begins on the paper version. This was question 5, and then there are a series of items associated with that. And then as you can see here, this is where we start looking at the physical activity section. So again, on the screen of the online version, we know that's a little bit confusing. So we're encouraging you to look at the paper versions first, select your items, the actual items, the terminology, and the options will match up exactly. It may just be simpler to look at the print versions to decide which items you plan to address, and then go to the live site and set up the actual item selection. So we'll go back to that. Once you've determined that you're interested in asking certain questions off of the tool, you simply go to the bottom here and you're able to click Submit Survey. Okay. Once you hit Submit Survey, you'll simply see that survey then in the way that you've titled it added to your list. You'll see the county. In this instance, this survey was associated with a county. You'll see it was a unique program type, the level of IRB, the start and end dates, which looks like I have an error in my start and end date, which is okay because I could go to the actual edit icon over here and edit the survey. And then you'll also see that no surveys have been emailed or printed at this time. But again, you see the actions for being able to do those features. Okay. Again, just as a quick reminder, you're able to edit surveys at any time, but you won't be able to delete a survey once data is associated with it. We'll go ahead now and look at some of the live features for what it looks like to email a survey. And so again, this looks just like what you saw on the screenshots a moment ago. You simply click on that envelope and you can see that it was already sent to a series of people, which is a nice record so that you know you're not sending it to a duplicate list of folks. But then you're able to add additional email addresses separated by comma or semicolon. You're able to identify the grade which you're sending the survey to. And that grade piece is important in just terms of keeping track of how many responses have been sent and received within a certain grade level. And you'll see that as we go back to the screen in terms of those tracking responses. You're able to enter the subject line for your email, and you're able to tailor the message associated with that email. One of the features that this does not have is the ability for you to send reminders, so it may be important for you to copy and paste the email addresses into your own email account and send reminders, because currently you cannot do that from this site. Okay, so those are the email features. Should we decide that we want to print a survey, we're simply able to click the number of surveys that we want to print here, and let's say that I need to print 5 additional surveys, and in this case I'm printing 5 additional surveys for grades 8 to 12. I go ahead and click Send, and there'll be a pop-up that appears at the bottom of the screen that says, do you want to open or save this printing of the surveys? In this case I'll open it, but I encourage you to save these. In a moment we'll look at the identification number that appears at the top of the screen, which creates an important reason for saving the surveys. Once you open the surveys that you have just generated the print for, so these are the 5 surveys we've just asked it to print for us, you can see that it is a collection of all 5 of those surveys in one document. At the top of each survey, each new survey, you see a survey number. In this case, the survey number is 118, and as you scrolled through this document, you would see surveys 119, 120, 121, and 122. Those numbers are not associated with the user or the participant rather, or the respondent in any way. Those are simply a response rate tracking number. Those numbers are really important so that when you go back to actually key in the responses from surveys that were taken paper and pencil, you'll need the survey numbers that the system has generated. And so one of the questions we've gotten is, well, do I have to print then this long document every time I go to administer a survey? You could choose just to print survey number 118, photocopy that, and pass it out. But when you sit down to key in the data, you'll need to use that range of 118, 119, 20, 21, and 22 as you key in responses. It won't allow you to key in responses with surveys that aren't associated with a survey number that has been administered by the system. So again, it's important to remember the range of those numbers, whether or not you actually pass out the printed versions with the numbers on the top, but it's important to remember those numbers and the range of those numbers for the data entry. So we'll say that we're done printing surveys. We'll go ahead and close that. Once I am ready actually to enter a survey, so I have a completed survey that's in front of me from the paper and pen responses, I simply click here and you'll see that I have to enter an appropriate number. So I can enter 118 because I know that's one that I just generated. I'm able to click send and it brings up a blank survey, and I would just complete this just as it was completed on the paper version by the participant that I have in front of me at that point in time. Once I've appropriately hit all of the right responses, and I'll just click through a couple of those here. I hit complete survey, and it says survey was successfully completed. I can go back at that point in time to my survey dashboard, and I can see that another survey has been completed associated with those I've printed. So again, I'm able to see my response rate. The response rate on the emailed surveys right here is pretty good. We've sent 6, 4 have been completed. In the printed surveys, we've printed about 55 and only entered 3 of those responses at this time. So again, that just allows you with those numbers at the top to keep track of that response rate. Again, it is not associated with the participant or their information in any way. Just quickly going through the last couple of these icons, again, this gives you the ability to go in and edit the survey should you need to delete an item or add an additional item, and then you have the feature here for deleting a survey. At this time, I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint and talk briefly about the reporting features. So the last step in administering the survey is to run the reports once the data has all been entered, whether it's via email or whether you've collected paper versions and then entered those at your county office or local office. You're able to run reports. You're able to run reports on more than one survey at a time, should you choose to do that, and we'll actually look at this when we go back to the live site, but you're able to see all of the surveys that you have, whether it's under your county or under your LGU, and you're able to select one or more than one of those surveys to run reports on. Again, you're able to sort by site, so if you happen to be a land grant administrator who sees everyone's surveys across all of your counties, you're able to sort it just by site or by groups of sites should you only want to look at surveys and responses from a certain region of your state. You'd be able to select the sites associated with that region and then look at that data together. Right now, the reporting features allow you to run either a raw data file or an aggregate data file. At this point in time, there isn't any tools in the online system for sophisticated analysis, but you are able to run your raw data file and some very basic aggregation data so that you can then do further analysis at your local site. And there are also pop-up descriptions available on the live site, and we'll look at these that have some annotation as to what you'll find in either the raw data or the aggregate data files. If you're not familiar with working with a raw data file, they can be a little bit confusing to look at first, and so we've created these annotated samples to give you better guidance as to exactly what you're seeing in regards to the information in each column on the CSV file. So at this point in time, I'll go back to the live site and we'll look at the reporting features in more detail. So we're able to go now, again, this is logged into an admin account, and so you can see on the reporting screen they're able to see the list of their land-grant university and all the counties associated with that university. They're able to filter by organization should they choose to do that. So in this case, maybe Jessica is only interested in looking at surveys that are from a certain county. So she's able to filter by that organization, and you can see that then eliminates all the other surveys, and she can look at a cleaner, shorter list of the surveys just associated with one particular county. In this instance, there's no data yet associated with that new survey we've just created, so we'll go back to the larger organization and bring up our other test survey. We're then able to select if there were data associated with this survey and there were items in common between these two surveys that would give us a reason to aggregate their data together. We could select both of those and run the data reports on those together, but in this instance we're only going to look at the data that's been collected on this particular survey, and we have the ability to run either a raw data file again or an aggregate data file. The raw data file represents each individual response by participant, and so you'll see each participant. So if you've had 25 students who've completed the survey, you'll see 25 rows of unique data, and we'll click on this in just a moment. You're also able to see a slightly different view of the same data, which is represented by cumulative responses to each survey item. And so those are actually in columns as opposed to looking at several rows of participant responses through the columns. We're able just to look at the number of students who responded to each question in each way. And so we'll look at what each of those reports looks like separately. So when you're ready to run your data, we've got a survey selected. We clicked on the green button to run the raw survey data. As you can see, there are 7 surveys completed. So when we open up the actual Excel file, we can see then those 7 responses that were associated with the first grades are here. These are the 4th grade responses, and then these are the 8th grade responses. I'm actually going to close this for just a moment and bring up the annotated sample, which will give you better detail of exactly what you're looking at on those screens. So again, if you're not familiar with a raw data file, this is a helpful guide. This is a guide for you to be able to understand specifically the information that's in each column of that survey. So again, in column A, you'll find the name that was given to the survey. In column B, you'll find the type, whether it was cross-sectional, unique, or needs assessment. You'll find the level of IRB approval that was associated with those survey administration. You'll find whether or not it was associated with a grant. You'll find a column that shows the name of the organization that created the survey. So if it was just the University of Nebraska, whether it was the University of Nebraska at a specific county. You'll see the level of the organization that's creating the survey. You'll see the actual internal unique number for each respondent. You'll see the grade associated with that respondent. You'll see the timestamp for when the respondent completed the survey. You'll see a column that designates what type of responses, and so the first set of responses we're going to be looking at are demographic responses. And then you'll also see in this last column that this is demographic question number 1, response 1. So you'll see question 1, response 1 here, and a number 1 entered in this column indicates that that's the selection for question 1 that they put. So you can see that the first 2 students in this particular sample on question 1 did choose response 1, and the next student chose response 2. So again, if you're not familiar with looking at a raw data file, this is a guide to help you understand what's best represented in those columns. And these raw data files can easily be transferred into SPSS or saved as an Excel file so that further analysis can be done in another system that you're more familiar with. Similarly, we can look at the data, and as opposed to, again, by individual survey respondent, we can look at aggregate responses per item. And so we'll just look quickly. Again, this is another annotated file for how that aggregate response data looks. So instead of seeing individual respondents by individual rows, what you'll see is for question 1, this is question 1, response 1 of 3. There was 1 person, response 2 of 3 for question 1. There were 0 persons. And so while there isn't a lot of data associated with this particular item, what you'd see here is total numbers. So if there were 25 students who had completed this particular survey and say 10 of them had selected 1 of 3, you'd see a 10 here, you'd see a 15 here. It just allows you to look at the data in a slightly different way. The response is already collapsed together by response. So you can see quickly the percentage or the number of students from your total sample who've responded to an item in each way. Again, at this time, those are the only reporting features available in this site, so further analysis will need to be conducted through your land-grant university or through your grant. We hope that the presentation today has been a helpful overview of the information that's and the features that are currently available. Again, as you have questions about any of the features discussed in any segments of this presentation, whether it is the organization